other peers would really kind of give these backhanded racist comments, but no one would ever pull them up on it. And it was okay. And I have these vivid memories, and I write about them in my thesis, going, why did this happen? Why was it okay? And why didn't I say anything?
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. You've all blown me away with your support in the last wee while, and particularly in listening to and sharing Craig Watson's story in the last episode. I've received some messages of late which have been really encouraging, so thank you for that. This podcast only exists because people like you are listening to it, and it only grows because of all you amazing people who tell your friends and family about it or post it on your socials. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and please keep passing on the love, and let's keep looking for ways to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. One recurring theme on this podcast is addressing issues of race and culture and talking to people who can help us navigate the journey of racial reconciliation. We've focused primarily on the Aotearoa New Zealand context, but for those of you overseas, I'm sure there are elements that relate to wherever it is that you are. We've had kōrero, or conversations, with Te Kāriri Whitia Scarborough, Kat Poi, Andrew Judd, Naomi Nicholas and Matt Renata, just to name a few, who all looked at the topic from different perspectives and had different things for us to think about as they shared their own stories with us. Today we continue that journey with Carey Thomas. Carey is a teacher who has an interest in helping change the education system to reflect our bicultural nature as a country. She has recently finished a Masters Thesis looking at what it means to be a Pākehā, engaging with Te Ao Māori, or the world of Māori, and what are the barriers that get in the way of that. She particularly looked at past moments in her own life where she felt a resistance to engage and explored why that was. We discuss Carey's passion for kids, for teaching, and for change. We talk about the failings of the education system in providing for all kids, and what are some of the things that are stopping us from moving ahead well. We talk about the term Pākehā and the misconceptions around it, and we hear her thoughts about why it can be so confronting for Pākehā to engage with things Māori or even confront racism. Also discussing where Carey sees hope that things could actually change. This is episode 48 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Carey Thomas. Kia ora, Carey. Welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora. Nice to be here.
So, Carey, no hea koe. Who are you? Where are you from?
Ko Carey taku ingoa. No airangi ni whiti o Putipuna. I whānau mai ahau ki Rotorua, I tipu ake ahau te Papakura. Ko te hingo tuku piringa no ona kiritea o. He Pākehā ahau, ko Thomas tuku whānau. My name is Carey, and I was born in the Bay of Plenty in Rotorua, but grew up in Papakura. And I now reside in a beautiful place in Tamaki Makaurau, on a kiritea, Hobsonville Point. And I am proudly Pākehā. I'm a teacher by trade, so I've been in education for nearly 20 years and have worn many different hats in that space. Training as a teacher, mentor, leader. I've got 4 children, twin boys and 2 stepsons who are awesome. And we are a blended family.
Awesome. And congratulations on recently getting married.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's actually 1 year tomorrow.
Wow. Exciting.
Yeah, really exciting. Exciting we actually got to get married considering it's been pretty much a year of lockdowns.
Yeah, true. Yeah, because you're in Tamaki Makaurau up in Auckland, which has had way more lockdowns than the rest of us.
Yes.
How hard has that been from a personal point of view?
I think that lockdown fatigue is definitely a real thing, and I think it definitely has challenged a lot of us with our own mental health and well-being. But yeah, with the support of your whānau and stuff, being able to get through it's been okay. But definitely a bit of a challenge for me, being newly married and writing a thesis in lockdown conditions was, bit of a
Yeah,
challenge.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually met over 20 years ago now. It's I don't want it to be that long ago. Over 20 years
How
ago
old
now.
are
Yeah.
we?
When I went to performing arts school in 1999,
Oh man.
you were a year ahead of me at the performing
Oh
arts
god.
school, and your kind of main focus there was dance and drama.
Yep.
Is that something that you've kept going?
Yeah, definitely. Always dramatic. No. um, yeah, absolutely. Look, in many different ways, but probably focus more on my dance from an education perspective and teaching dance for a number of years. Yeah, probably from that side of things, more of a teaching perspective. But I think when you're an artist and you're probably similar, you can't help but think in you can't help but think through the lens of dance or something when you're processing life or doing life. It's just kind of a part of you no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do any lockdown dances?
Ah, I can't say I did, Andy. I didn't join the flash mobs, tragically. Tragically. I've got 4 boys, so they were like, what are you doing? But yeah.
Yeah. I know you've been involved in obviously teaching, like you say, for a long time now as well. And we ended up at the same church as well after we'd been at performing arts school together. And you went on there to actually run some dance stuff in that church.
Yeah.
You were running stuff connected to your school.
Yeah.
How was all of that fitting together for you?
Yeah, that was really cool. I think from, a community perspective, it was really nice to have built good relationships within the school I was teaching in at the time and through the church and local community. So, yeah, I had the opportunity to run a dance school and kind of connected those worlds together, which was really cool. And that was, yeah, for a couple of years. Yeah, but yeah, really cool to build those connections and create kind of like a creative space for our young people to explore their identity and their voice in the language of dance. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, you are a teacher. What is it that you most love about your role as a teacher?
Well, I have been teaching for about, gosh, close to 20 years. um, and I think no matter who I'm teaching, whether it was, I started out teaching 6-year-olds and then gradually shifted to intermediate kiddies and did youth mentoring and lots of different things with different age groups. But I think fundamentally what I love about teaching is relationships. So teaching to me is all about relationships. And I find it such a privilege to build relationships with the young people I teach in their whānau and collectively building relationships to see our kids thrive and succeed, however that is interpreted in their journey in education.
Yeah, that totally fits the picture I have of you. From when I saw you, you started the intermediate kind of age youth group that was going at the church back in the day, and again, you seem to have this care for these kids, and more than just, hey, I want to teach you some information, but actually,
Mm.
I want to see you thrive at life. I want to see you feeling belonging and feeling welcome and feeling joy, which is actually, I think that's brilliant because I've had explained to me that teachers are people who used to like kids. Um, but
Used to.
that's what one teacher once told me. But you're not that sort of person. Like, to me, you're a teacher who actually loves the kids and you cares you cares about them. You care about them. And I, you could see that as an observer looking in. So yeah, interesting to hear that that's kind of the thing that drives you as well, and that you find most rewarding.
Oh, thanks, Andy.
What is it about the teaching space that is most challenging?
I think the most challenging about mainstream education, and it's still going through, I mean, for years it's been going through different changes, but it's how do we best cater for a variety of different children and their whānau in front of you. And I don't think that the mainstream model of education honours or fits everybody well, particularly in the space that I stand now, and that I've spent a lot of critical thought and reflection upon, is the bicultural landscape. And the great thing is that the education sector is asking more questions about why and how we can approach this and do this better. But from a teaching perspective, that's something that I see we still really struggle with as a whole across the board, whether it's teaching, leadership, cultural understandings, and how we do that well. So I don't think that that mainstream model fits everyone well. And on a personal note, my father, he is Fijian Irish, and he passed away about 10 years ago now, but I saw the education system fail him hugely as a young man. And just the consequences of that, obviously I saw when I was older, not when, as a child, but and I think probably that propels me to want to do better in my teaching space for everyone that comes through the doors. Like you said, children knowing their tūranga waiwai, their place of connection and belonging. And I think that that's something that our education system could and should do better at.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think of my schooling years, and I'm the personality type that our school system is set up for. So I really enjoyed education. I learnt a lot. I did well, but not necessarily because I was more intelligent than others, but because actually my personality fitted with the style of education that we had. And so it never occurred to me that others didn't fit that. But I'm a board chair of a primary school now, and so I see behind the system, and you see the kids that are, I guess previously I would have just labelled them trouble kids. These are the kids that are problematic, whereas now I'm looking at them and going, actually, these are the kids who have had the hardest life in a lot of ways. These are the kids who aren't being looked after well enough. These are the kids who, and that's not necessarily even putting that on their family. That's, the education system or just society in general. It doesn't cater to supporting the different situations that people of different cultures, different socioeconomic groups, everything. It's a big melting pot that turns into a system that works really well for some and not at all for others.
Yeah, it's a deficit model.
Like you say, it's good that people are still looking at how can we change this, but yeah, I mean, it definitely is something we need to keep asking. How can we change this? Because, like you say, it's not something that actually is working for everyone.
No, absolutely not. It's it is, like in your experience, it set up a certain people group to succeed well, and that was our, that's from our from colonization, and Mill calls it a whitewash society, which means that everything has been set up for the dominant culture, for Pākehā, New Zealand Europeans to succeed in and do well in, and it's built on those foundational things of Western knowledge and Western science. This is what you'll do to succeed. This is how you'll do it. Off you go. And then for everyone else who sits outside of that, who has maybe an Indigenous worldview, for our treaty partner, a Te Ao Māori worldview, it doesn't fit into that. And so, therefore, you're not going to succeed in this. And that's the tragedy, because it is choosing to disadvantage certain people groups while advantaging others. I think back to when my mum grew up in the far north in Kaikohe, in an adopted whānau, and she has vivid memories of some of her best friends getting strapped or taken out of the class because they spoke Te Reo Māori. They had to speak English, or they had to have a European name. And although we don't see that now, which is great, and things are changing, the same could be said, well, why are we getting our Korean students or our Chinese students to change their names to these European names? So things have changed and are changing, but there's still so much we can do too. Yeah.
Yeah, so this bicultural area is something that you don't just have strong opinions about, but you've actually done a whole lot of research about. You've written a thesis in this area. What was it that got you interested in exploring this as a research topic?
Well, I think for me, it's my life story. And so for me growing up, I grew up in Pākehā with my family, and I have always been quite socially justice driven and also very curious. So growing up, I noticed that the way my dad was treated in different situations was really different to the way my mum was treated in situations. And in reflection, it has been because my father essentially had brown skin and my mum had white skin. And so I have vivid memories sitting in the back of our Cortina, and often my dad would get pulled over by the police. And, they'd do the checks, look in and see my mum and me and be like, oh, yeah, okay, you're all good, you can carry on. Compared to my mum, who would hardly ever get pulled over, even driving the same kind of broken down car. And I saw lots of this kind of happen in my childhood. And as a child, you just think that's normal, that's the way the world is. But as you get older, as I got older, I got a lot more curious to go, why does that happen? And noticing a lot of my peers, similar things would happen to them. Or on the flip side, other peers who, in particular, I trained with to become a teacher, would really kind of give these backhanded kind of racist comments, but no one would ever pull them up on it. And it was okay. And I just remember going, well, vividly, I have these vivid memories and I write about them in my thesis, going, why did this happen? Why was it okay? And why didn't I say anything?
Yeah, well,
So, yeah, I hugely curious, I think, led me to that. And then a few years ago in my postgrad, I had an amazing lecturer, Alison Jones, who actually was my supervisor for my thesis. And she was this incredible academic woman, Pākehā woman, but just really wanting to examine and look at cross-cultural relationships. And she has got an incredible story herself, and she's done so much work in that space. And I just remember sitting in her class and being really inspired about the questions she was asking about the education system, about the behaviours that we as Pākehā have, but also why do we shy away from the term Pākehā? Kind of asking those questions. Who are you living on this land in relationship with tangata whenua? Who do you call yourself? And so I was really inspired by her research and her work, particularly around Pākehā identity. That I started my thesis journey, and I asked the question, a Pākehā dance with Te Ao Māori. And really, for me, that was looking at my own relationship and understanding of Te Ao Māori. Is it something that I'm engaged with? Is it something that I partner with? Is it something I dance with? From that kind of metaphor. And so that was unpacking my own experience. So I focused on 3 pivotal memories from my time in the education system. And I looked at the invisible barriers that prevent me from engaging with Te Ao Māori. And the barriers were Pākehā identity, ignorance, and fragility. And so it was unpacking those concepts, trying to dig deep and understand what are these invisible barriers and how have they prevented me, a Pākehā, to build relationship, to connect, to engage, to understand parts of Te Ao Māori. Pākehā can't understand all parts of Te Ao Māori because some of that is so sacred and only for tangata whenua. But what has prevented me? And that has been a transformational journey for me, because it has made me pause and reflect on my childhood, on my young adult years, to where I'm at now in the education system, and go, wow, okay. Just have lots of new knowledge and understanding. And I think has made me, as I said earlier, become proudly Pākehā from something that I used to shy away from. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed you've got an Instagram page that I've been following that you called Becoming Pākehā, which for a lot of us would go, aren't you already Pākehā? Like, what does that term Becoming Pākehā mean to you?
Well, I think actually that term has been misunderstood for generations, because we have grown up, in Anne Milne's words, in a whitewashed community. A part of that is that, it is that barrier of being incredibly ignorant into understanding, or having the education and knowledge to understand what that term Pākehā means. But it's also a term that has been, has for generations been misunderstood. And I remember talking about it in one of my classes when I was doing my postgraduate, and people still had the belief that Pākehā meant white pig or white flea, or something quite derogatory.
Right.
To the point where a woman in my class said that she could vividly actually remember it being written down in some kind of text in her mainstream school. And so the term Pākehā, I think actually needs to be, it needs to be talked about and discussed, because there are these false beliefs about actually what it means. But I think it's a pivotal starting point for us living here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We have to ask, who are we in relationship with tangata whenua? Who are we in relationship to the land that we live on, that we work on, that we worship on, that we bury our loved ones in? What is our relationship to this?
And so for you, the term Pākehā has that relational connotation? It's not just about, hey, these are the people with this colour skin.
No, because I think it's deeper and more complex than race. So if you're looking at, race studies, it focuses more on colour, I suppose. But I think as a being, as a people, as a culture, so to speak, it is something so deep and so complex, and actually incredibly beautiful. I love what Annie Makaere famously said, and actually this is in Alison Jones's book, A Pākehā Memoir, and it says, there is nowhere else in the world that one can be Pākehā, whether the term remains forever linked to the shameful role of the oppressor, or whether it can become a positive source of identity and pride. It is up to Pākehā themselves. All that is required from them is a leap of faith. And so it is definitely a journey. It's not, yes, we can use it as a term, but I think it is a lot deeper than that. It's about relationship. It's about connection. It's about, ultimately, te tiriti o waitangi. It's about all of those things, because I think if we can understand who we are as Pākehā, that will change the way that you engage and understand what it means to live in a bicultural nation. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point too, that like you go anywhere else in the world, Pākehā is not a thing. It's only a thing here because of the connection to Māori.
That's right. And actually, when we first arrived to Aotearoa, New Zealand, many years ago, the term Pākehā only became in existence because of relationship with Māori. So Māori, which means ordinary, use the term Pākehā to describe or say you are different from us, you know. So we kind of, the term Māori and Pākehā brought each other into relationship as well. Like those terms brought each other into existence, which I think is really cool and really interesting as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that real relational perspective on it, because, like you say, there is so much rubbish out there of, what it means or what it doesn't mean, or, people that, however they'd like to describe themselves. And even in the past, I'd preferred the term New Zealand European, and now I'm like,
Which
what does it
box did
even
you
mean?
tick?
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm like, no, but it's interesting though, because as you pointed out, it's a relational thing, and it's only been as I've engaged more with Te Ao Māori, with the world of Māori, that I've become really comfortable with that term Pākehā, because I've felt the comfort of the relationship that sits within. And I think, like you say, ignorance is just a huge part of where the barriers are. The other word that you brought up, or one of the other words you brought up, was fragility. Do you want to explain a little bit about what that means? Because again, it's a word that gets tossed around a little bit, and then a lot of people that are using it get labelled as woke by other people, and then we're all just in different camps and nobody listens to each other. So from your perspective, what is this thing of fragility?
Yeah, I really like the term fragility, and I was introduced to it through my research, through an author and researcher, Robin DiAngelo. And so she wrote a book called White Fragility: Why is it so hard for white people to talk about racism? And the big issues that tackle fragility or are associated to fragility are anxiety and fear. And that comes down to unpacking questions around privilege and ignorance, I think, too. So although in my research I look at ignorance as a different barrier to fragility, it's very closely linked from the perspective of when you do grow up in a society that has been created for you, the dominant culture to succeed in, to have everything, to live a full life, so to speak. The ignorance that you have ignorance to how others live, and actually there's other research around that in regards to how that develops in your brain, and how linked ignorance and fragility are, and how we function and how we think when you live in a society that serves you. But fragility is that knowing that you are privileged, and if you're going to have cross-cultural relationships and enter into that, it's about facing your own privilege, which many people choose not to. And so often a reaction to facing our privilege or facing racism is we might completely ignore, separate ourselves, or we might somehow turn it around and manipulate it, saying that we are the victims in facing racism. There's a great chapter in her book about white women's tears. So her research was done in the United States of America, but there's lots of similarities, which I see here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But it's fragility. It's those things of knowing that we are privileged, but we are fearful to face that. We're fearful to let it go. And so we act out in these quite vulgar ways, really, pushing it on other people and not facing it ourselves, which racism is not a Māori problem. It's actually a Pākehā one, a white European problem. We have to face it, and lots of people run from it. Or fragility might sound like those backhanded comments at the dinner table, comments on being late or whatever, oh, Māori time or whatever, and fragility is prevalent, I think, in our society.
It's really interesting. You talked about the anxiety or the fear and stuff, and I guess I've noticed it in my own life that when you encounter those kind of situations that are different, or where you have to face some of that stuff, it's actually really uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I don't think that Western culture in particular sets us up to do uncomfortable well. That we like things to work in precision. The progress mindset, the Enlightenment factory. We like things to be running well, and conflict's not a great thing that a lot of us like, but also just this idea of actually sometimes being uncomfortable is actually the best thing for you. Is not necessarily something that we celebrate as a culture. And yeah, I remember being on a marae actually, and someone saying, as Māori, we have to take a step towards Pākehā all the time. That's we have to, because we have to speak English, we have to do all these things that involve us taking a step. And we're not actually asking you to become Māori. What we're asking is that you would just take a step towards us too.
Yeah.
And I thought about it and went, yeah, that's something they have to do, but something I can choose not to do if I want to. And so that was one of the catalysts for me to go, no, actually this is something that I'm going to keep stepping into, and which is has been pretty life-changing for me as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I've totally noticed that fragility thing, even in my own experience of that, going, oh, do I want to have to face it this time? And going, it could be easy to not stand up against that this time because I just can't be bothered, or and then hearing my Māori friends going, oh man, I'm just so tired from standing against this, and going, actually they don't have a choice. So that is privilege, that I have a choice.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I think it's, as Makari said, it's taking that leap of faith. But to do that, you've got to become incredibly vulnerable. You've got to go, I am going to make mistakes, but I'm going to keep stepping forward. I'm going to keep taking that leap, because it's incredibly important in our bicultural landscape. We are a bicultural nation, and I think, I believe every Pākehā should be taking that leap of faith, or positioning themselves like you in vulnerable spaces. And they're privileged spaces to be in anyway. I mean, being invited onto a marae, or, what a beautiful, precious experience. I mean, my example of that fragility, which I saw in full flight at Teachers College many years ago, but a peer of mine, it was compulsory to take a Māori paper about Māori education, and he felt it was absolutely fine and okay to blurt out how offended he was at taking this paper, and how upset and angry he was that he would never use this Māori stuff in his teaching career. And, I just remember standing there quite dumbfounded and frozen and not knowing what to say, because I was fearful of, I guess, of saying the wrong thing to him, but also because I'm not tangata whenua, I'm not Māori. What do I say in this space? And for me, yes, I was feeling anxious, but for him, what I found in my research and unpacking that situation was actually he was incredibly fearful and anxious. He displayed fragility because he was so used to going to classes, knowing everything, being the top student, knowing what to do to get an A, that for him to step into a space that he knew nothing about, that he potentially would have to face his privilege and position of who he was in society, terrified him. And so his fragility came out in this very offensive, verbally racist way. And so, fragility comes out and manifests in many different ways.
It's interesting, actually. I think of how it has played out in the church at times too, where the fragility, or the not coping when something is different, has actually come out in things being declared as wrong, or evil, or And
Yeah.
actually, when you look at it, it's just different. It's not the way that you have grown up. And
Mm.
so yeah, having that even in that spiritual space, going, hey, just because something feels really off to you doesn't make it wrong. Maybe you just don't understand enough yet. Maybe you need to lean into that
Yeah.
to investigate that and go, why is this feeling like this to me? And it might be that you go, actually, this is really whack theology, and that's why it feels off. Or it might be, actually, this is because this is different, and
Mm.
because this is not the way that I do things. And so, what can I learn from that other space? And I think that's been one of the biggest things for me is that as I've learnt more of the Māori world, I actually feel like I've learnt more about myself.
Mm.
That I've learnt where some of those things are that I feel uncomfortable around, and why do I do that? And I've also seen beauty in the way that people of a different culture do things. That
Mm.
actually that's not how my culture does it, and wow, that's a real challenge to my culture, because actually, maybe I'm really focused on achievement and they're really focused on relationship. So a whole bunch of things like that has been huge for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, what a beautiful reflection of who God is when we get to be around and be challenged by difference, you know? I think
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's God in a lot of ways. He isn't, God isn't, can't be controlled, or, oh, it's like this and it looks like this and it's got to be this and it's got to be done this way.
yeah,
No, 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 no.
yeah.
There's many different ways to look at things. And
Only a few episodes ago, I was talking to Matt Renata, and he was talking about, have being challenged about believing in the colonized God, and
yeah.
how he's, as a Māori who became a Christian in a white space, he actually was really appreciative of that, because that introduced him to his faith. But now he's exploring, actually, what does it look like when God isn't this colonized box, that I've been handed? What does it look like when, my heritage and culture comes in? And talking to him about that was
Mm.
really beautiful, because again, it was a challenge to go, actually, the white Western idea of God that I've grown up with
Mm.
isn't the full picture. You know,
Mm.
um, that it's a glimpse. It's one perspective. And that's actually, yeah, that's, again, it could be confronting in a negative way. You could react negatively to that, or you can
Mm.
go, oh wow, what can I do with that? Where does that leave me? What does that teach me? All of those kind of things just buzz through my head now. When in the past I would have just gone, bro, that's weird. You know. um, so yeah,
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's having that open mind and open heart, and the beauty and diversity of people, and the gift that is, the gift that is to us, rather than yeah, just shutting it down and walking away. I think it's a real gift. Yeah.
so for you, I mean, this was very focused around the education setting. What is it that you learnt through this that you think could benefit the education system, or just even the environments that you're in as an educator?
The education system for so long, we used to call them target kids. Māori Polynesian children, they're our target children. What a terrible thing to label children, number one. But what it's such an appalling model of best practice. Oh, sorry. Um, that we constantly point at others and go, oh, that's the problem, that's the problem. But actually, we've got to point at ourselves. And Georgina Tuere Stewart, incredible Māori academic, she wrote about a white typology in education, and she talks about white saviors, white vampires, white allies, and all these different kind of characters in education. Around that, sometimes we want to tick the Māori box, so we suck everything out. Oh, we better put on a little cultural performance, tick. And just kind of using Māori for the little tick cultural boxes without understanding, building relationship, and, actually soothing our kids. So, yeah, I think that change starts with us. And so to want to bring about change or bring different perspectives and understandings, you have to go through that yourself. And one thing that's been in the media at the moment is Aotearoa New Zealand History's curriculum. Now, I've just started to look at that document, and there's different bits and pieces coming out. But my biggest concern about that is to teach children or our future generations the history or story of Aotearoa New Zealand. You as a teacher or a leader in an education space have to understand and experience it yourself first. And so that's probably where my heart and my head are at through what I have gone through to look at these invisible barriers. And not just, skim along the surface, oh yes, Pākehā identity, ignorance and fragility, actually to dive deep into it and understand it. What does it look like in my life? What does it look like in my space, in my classroom, in my education setting? What does it look like? And then when I identify it within myself and within my space, I then have the understanding to change, and change that comes not only with me personally, but with me for those people beside me, around me. I think it's got to be a, I know it's a buzzword, but a collaborative, collective effort for that to take place. And so I think it really starts with teachers and leaders in those spaces first. And once we have that understanding and that new knowledge, and there's different buzzwords for what we call it in education, cultural capabilities, cultural understandings, cross-cultural understandings. If you have that from an authentic, genuine perspective, then I think we can see change in our classrooms and how we approach our children and their whānau, and valuing and respecting and understanding whakapapa and what that means. Then I think we can start to see some change with that. Yeah, it's a big question because it's complicated, it's complex, and we were talking about fragility. People don't want to have conversations about colonisation. Going through my study, the amount of eye rolls and people going, oh, with what I was studying, and almost, I cried so much last year just reading the research and reflecting on myself as being a part of the system and trying to understand the impacts of colonisation. It's really confronting. And lots of people don't want to have those conversations. So it's how do we have those conversations? How do we approach that where people can position themselves to be vulnerable, to critically self-reflect and be okay with that? I think so often, there are lots of teachers out there who are passionately advocating for this, and I love that. But there are also teachers who are like, I don't want to know about it. That's in the past. It's such a tired school, such a tired way of thinking. Oh, that's in the past. That wasn't me. That wasn't my ancestors. And the danger with that is if we keep saying that, things won't change. We're not going to progress. We're not going to actually start to look at ways how we can be a bicultural nation within the mainstream education. And that's what I'm passionately advocating for, and prompting questions and inquiring into, to help be a part of the change or support change, because actually it's my responsibility now, because I have been, I am forever changed through what I've walked through and journeyed through and critically reflected upon. I can't help but be that in whatever school or space I end up in. It would be devaluing who I am and my story and my space. So, yeah.
Yeah. Where do you find hope in all of this?
One thing I love about hope is that it is a small word, but it's got such a massive meaning, doesn't it? It can, where do I see hope in this? I see hope when recently I put out there to some beautiful colleagues to do a Te Reo Māori course through the Ministry of Education. It's an incredible course, actually, Te Ahu o Te Reo Māori. And the hope is when people go, me, they jump on board and they want to do it. There's the hope. Or it's when I go, hey, why don't we look at ways that we can build relationship with mana whenua, and people jump on board and they want to be a part of it. You know, it's other people wanting to be a part of it, and I think it's other people leading in different spaces and areas with it too. The hope is when you have kids in your classroom who can pronounce Te Reo Māori words well, you know, or who are correcting others, or who are correcting their teachers. The hope is when you look at Te Ture Te Waitangi within your classroom and you're having critical conversations with 9 and 10-year-olds. That's the hope, because the hope is our children. The hope is found in our children. The hope is found in the generations who are going to carry this on. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see the waka of change happening in our mainstream education space.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, thank you so much for giving time to talk to us today. And thank you for your passion and your heart for the young people that you serve. Thank you for your exploration of this topic. And I really appreciate that you're not another white person going, how can Maori kids do better? You know, it's not, that hasn't been your focus. It's been, how can we do better as Pākehā? How can the system do better? You know, how can this work for everybody? And I think that's such a, you know, there's been so many cases of white saviorism where people have gone, hey, we've noticed these kids not doing as well. How can they do better? And not going, actually, how can we do better? And so I love that heart that you've come with of going, actually, when it all boils down to it, this is about me. You know, this is about what I need to learn so that I can do better. And then hopefully that can replicate outwards. Thank you for what you're doing to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Oh, thank you, Andy. Thank you for having me on here.
Hello, hello, heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
Carey's passion for this is so inspiring. Her willingness to be vulnerable and explore her own failings and fragility is a challenge to us all. So Carey, thank you for sharing yourself with us. Here is a blessing for you. Carey, as you explore and reflect on yourself and your identity, may you continue to discover who you are in all its beauty. May you continue to find the treasure of becoming Pākehā and what that allows you to bring to the world. May your marriage flourish and your children be a source of joy, your family helping to ground you as you continue to do good in the world through your teaching, your leadership in education spaces, and by just being you wherever you are. May the memory of your father always inspire you and give you energy to keep pushing for change, that others like your dad would not be failed by the education system in the ways that he was. May the kids in your classrooms continue to bring you hope, continue to give you courage and inspire you on in your journey. May you find regular opportunities to encourage and challenge colleagues towards a better way, helping them to find the courage to examine themselves in the way that you are doing for yourself. When you look back on this time in your life, may you be encouraged by all that has happened because you had the courage to begin this journey and to stand for something outside of the dominant culture's status quo. And lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strawn for the music and Rangi for the karakia. Join me next time when I talk to Age Palmer of the Addington Coffee Co-op. We hear about how the coffee co-op came about, what makes them different to other cafes in Christchurch, the kaupapa or heart of why they do things the way that they do, and we hear about the relationships they have with organisations they align with and the difference that makes in the world. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, Kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Humai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino.